Hi everyone, my name is Lucas Bruggeman. I'm Dutch, I live in Switzerland, but today I'm coming to you from Austria, St. Anton, and welcome to the first Hangout with Jim Rogers. It will be a Boxing Day special, looking back at 2013, looking ahead to 2014. First of all, welcome Jim, how are you doing?
I'm delighted to be here. My name is Jim Rogers. I'm an American living in Singapore. And I'm in Singapore at the moment on Boxing Day.
Okay, it's great to speak to you. Today we are kicking off JimRogersWorld.com, which is an independent website tracking Jim Rogers on a regular basis. Today's Boxing Day's Hangout is the first Hangout we are doing, and therefore it will not be live, but recorded. During a Hangout, Jim is able to answer questions from the crowd as well as from invited guests. Before I introduce you, the participants to today's Hangout, I quickly want to tell you about the idea behind Jim Rogers World. The goal is to bring together the large community of people that likes to track Jim Rogers, as well as to give Jim another platform to interact with the crowd. Personally, I know Jim a little longer than 9 years. In my previous job as managing director at ABN AMRO and Royal Bank of Scotland, I worked with Jim on several occasions. I'm also a big fan of Jim Rogers. What I like best about him is his very special way of looking at the world. He's very successful and renowned as an investor, and to me, he always seems ahead of the curve. So, after this short introduction, I want to welcome our participants. Well, of course, Jim Rogers, who lives in Singapore, as he said. Welcome, Jim. Thank you for spending Boxing Day with us. How did you celebrate Christmas yesterday?
Well, my in-laws are here, my mother-in-law and my father-in-law, and I have 2 little girls and a wife, and we all had we spent most of the day opening presents. I've never seen so many presents. Somebody has spoiled my children rotten. I thank everyone who did not send a present to my little girls.
Second, we have Ralph Peuner in Zurich. Ralph is a journalist and one of the co-founders of finnews.ch, which is an online platform, official, like the unofficial intranet for the Swiss financial professional. And welcome, Ralph. How did you celebrate Christmas in Zurich?
Yes, hello everyone. As it was raining the whole day, we had a family thing too, so many presents too, many things to eat, and the kids were happy that we didn't get out so much, so they could also play with their games together.
Well, great to have you here. Then we have Matthew Wong, who I know for over a little bit than 10 years as well. We used to work at ABN AMRO together. And Matthew is a blogger. He has a blog called Chat in Chinese and in German and in English. He's also a managing director at KGI Asia, which is a broker firm for equity. And I wonder if you celebrated Christmas, Matthew.
Indeed, Lucas. I'm with my family in Taiwan with Japanese dinner last night and drinking burgundy wine.
That's a nice combination. Well, then we have Bertie, who is the web designer of JimRogersWorld.com. He is in Portugal. He's American, though, but he lives in Portugal. And how did you celebrate Christmas, Bertie?
Sure. So I am known for cooking lamb, and I cooked a delicious lamb with some good Portuguese red wine. After that, we opened up some presents and had a nice little evening by the fireplace. So it was your typical family living abroad, and it was quite nice. Enjoyed it.
Welcome, Bertie.
Thank you.
Then we have, as last but not least, Irene Brunner, who is from Austria. I don't know, is he in Austria today? But she lives in Switzerland, works in the financial market for over a little bit more than 10 years, and is a follower of Jim Rogers for a long time, and has done some events with him as well. Welcome, Irene. How was your Christmas? you still have a problem in talking. Otherwise, then we will just. That's the charismatic thing of a hangout. It doesn't always work, but it is connected. We're all here. So I would like to kick off the Q&A session to use the most of Jim's time at Boxing Day. Ralph, maybe you want to kick it off.
Okay, thank you. Well, 2013 has been quite well, be that for the world economy, be that for the Eurozone here, or for the stock markets. And so to me, there's only one single question important for 2014. That's the question, are we on the road to a fundamental recovery? Or are we in the eye of the storm? That's the main question for me.
Well, that's a wonderful question. I wish I knew the answer. I will say that what has happened in 2013, and which many people did not see at the end of 2012, including me, is that the world is floating on an artificial ocean of liquidity, which is getting higher. And if you look out the window, Bertie, I'm sure you will see the ocean getting higher and higher, because it's the first time in recorded history that every major central bank is printing huge amounts of money. The Japanese said a year ago, we will print unlimited amounts of money. That was their word. So the Americans said, well, wait a minute, we can do that. We'll throw in a trillion with a T, US dollars every year. And then the Europeans said, well, we'll do whatever it takes. And the English, of course, who had a new guy coming in, said, don't worry, we'll take care of it too. So this has never happened before in recorded history. I heard them all say it. I even acted to some extent, but I did not act enough as far as owning shares are concerned. So the world's got this artificial situation. It can go on for a while longer. In America, there is no constraint now on Congress for spending money, because they had this little tempest several weeks ago, I should say. So now Congress has decided, well, we're not going to stop spending at all. And of course, the Federal Reserve and no central bank in the world has any constraint now. So it can go on longer than any of us expect, including me. And but be very careful, because it is artificial. The world economy as a whole is not getting much better. Certain people are getting the money, are getting a lot better, and their friends. I mean, if you're a Japanese stockbroker, you think you've died and gone to heaven now, because there's so much money floating around. The rest of us, in the end, are going to suffer very badly when this is over. Ralph?
You're certainly right. Say it's a single situation that all central banks in the world exaggerate in their loose money policy. But anyway, singular also means that we do not know exactly whether in the end you will get out fine. It's all about the leveraging. So you can develop the leverage smoothly or with a bank. Must it happen with a bank?
Well, no, nothing must happen, but it always has happened. I cannot remember any, what do they call it, soft landing. I don't remember any. I mean, every government in history has wanted to have a soft landing. I cannot remember that have done so successfully. But sure, maybe we have geniuses now running our central banks. Maybe all of these bureaucrats and academics will turn out to be geniuses instead of the fools, which I think they are. And if they are, if they're all geniuses, no, wait, Ralph, if they're all geniuses, I'll be the first to kiss their feet and build a monument in their honor. But it's never happened that way.
Well, that's the main answer. You don't believe in smartness of the central banks.
I think that's accurate to say, Ralph. That I know that I have no confidence in the brains of any central bank, especially if they went to Ivy League universities and if they're professors at Ivy League universities, especially that kind.
That's what I believe. Yes. But in the end, do you really have such an apocalyptic perspective? The main question is also, does the big capitalistic machine keep on functioning, keep on running? So you even doubt that?
Ralph, every 4 to 6 years in America, we've had economic situations, slowdowns, recessions, whatever, since the beginning of the Republic. They always come, whether we like it or not. There have been different reasons for many of them, but they always come. We had one at the beginning of this century, and then it was bad, but then things got better. Dr. Greenspan printed a huge amount of money, and so, but then, when the next one came, 4 to 6 years later, in 2008, it was much, much worse because the debt goes so much higher. Now, things are getting better again, but the next one that comes, Ralph, is going to be much, much worse because the debt has gone up by staggering amounts. In 2008, the American Central Bank, the Federal Reserve, had $800 billion of government bonds on its balance sheet. Now it has more than quintupled in 5 years. There's more than $4 trillion, and a lot of it is garbage, and it's getting worse every day, and likewise all the other central banks. So the debt is through the roof. The next time we have a problem, it's going to be worse. Let's hope the world doesn't come to an end the next time, because then, but the one after that, it's going to be a nightmare. It's a catastrophe.
Jim, what about tapering?
Well, yes, they're tapering, and they say they're going to continue. Dr. Bernanke just the other day, you notice the Japanese have never heard the word tapering. The Europeans don't seem to know the word. The English don't seem to know the word. But let's say the Americans continue, and they cut back by $10 billion a month or whatever they do. Eventually, Lucas, it's going to cause us problems, and then the markets are going. You see that some emerging markets are already going down. When we're all feeling pain, people are going to call up Dr. Yellen and say, "Oh, this is too painful. Please stop. Please stop." Now, after she gets 50 of those phone calls or whatever, then she's going to say, "Oh, gosh, I've gone too far." And she's going to start loosening up again. Everybody's going to breathe a big sigh of relief, and it's going to carry on, and the markets will go back up. But that's all I'm describing there, Lucas, is the way markets work. You know, they go up, they have a correction, they go up again. There's always a reason for a correction. The next correction is going to be the pain from, quote, tapering. But once it gets bad, the bureaucrats and academics are going to weep and open up again.
Well, I personally, up to now, I'd rather have it with Warren Buffett, who once said that in the 20th century we had 2 world wars, dozens of mean small wars, big depressions, many financial crises, and the end, the Dow Jones grew, 70,000-fold, and the people got out richer. I mean,
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. And it's a good point. But I would also point out that in the 20th century, America became a creditor nation. In the 19th century, we borrowed huge amounts of money, but we used the money for railroads and factories and canals and schools. And then we became a creditor nation in 1914, and we got the fruits of borrowing and investing wisely. Since then, now we've become the largest debtor nation in the history of the world, and the debt is going higher and higher and higher, and we're not spending it on investments. We're spending it on welfare payments, transfer payments. We're buying tanks. Now, tanks are great for the guy who builds it, but it doesn't do any good for the world after that. I mean, it's not productive capacity any more than a welfare payment is. So, yes, Warren is exactly right. It was fantastic. But that was a different world if he's talking about the United States stock market. And I would also point out that at the beginning of that century that Warren's talking about, $1 was worth $1. If you look at the way it's been debased, pick any statistics you want. I mean, it's been debased by 98, 99% in that period of time. So we're all better off to some extent based on a lot of debt and a debasement of the currency.
Yeah, well, I got
the question.
Excuse me.
The question is, go ahead.
Sorry, but you're mainly talking about the problems America might have as a European. We had that in the 20th century, the lose of the position. I mean, there are two forces which are also quite single: the rise of millions and millions of people out of poverty in Asia, South America, even Africa, which just has started yet, and on the other side, the advantages advantages through interconnection, such as things as we do now. And as an optimist, I also would say that these forces are strong enough to keep the thing going, even amidst debate.
Well, okay. Well, the reason I talked about America was because you mentioned, you quoted Warren Buffett and his quote about America.
Okay.
Now, we can certainly talk about the rest of the world. There's no question that in the past 30 years, hundreds of millions of people have been pulled out of poverty, certainly in China, in Asia, and other parts of the world. And I hope and I presume that that's going to continue. The situation, of course, is that other people's standards of living are declining in America. Any statistics you want to use, including government statistics, show that the standard of living has declined for most Americans in the past 20 years, and likewise in Greece, Spain, many other countries. So, yes, we've had a lower standard of living in many parts, Japan even, in many parts of the world, while others are rising. There is no question about that. But that's the way the world works. We've always had some people rising and some people declining. The world has always worked that way. Now, of course, Ralph, the key is to not be in the ones that are going down and try to be in the ones that are going up. You can ask me in 30 years if we did it right or not.
Okay. Anyone else? I
want to a little bit more on this tapering. Yeah, this tapering must have an impact on commodity prices and especially on gold. What's your view on that?
Well, gold and commodity prices are two different things at the moment, in my view. Primarily, I own gold. I have not sold any gold. I've hedged some of my gold, but I've never outright sold any gold since I started buying gold in 1971. Now, gold prices went up 12 years in a row. That's extremely unusual. I don't know any asset in history that's gone up 12 years without a declining year. There may be some. I just don't know them. Now, so the correction is going also to be an anomaly in my view, because we had a strange rise. The market is correcting. In my view, it's going to continue. One of the reasons, of course, is a huge leverage that a lot of people in the gold market jumped into. Everybody said, oh, this is wonderful, gold will never go down. At the same time, India, which has been the largest buyer of gold for decades, the Indian politicians are blaming their problems on gold. Their second largest import, well, their first largest import is oil, crude oil. The second is gold. You can't do anything about crude oil, so they can blame everything on gold. They have cut back dramatically on the imports of gold with many taxes, regulations, controls, and that is one of the reasons that gold has been under pressure. I mean, no matter what the market, Lucas, if you take the largest buyer and cut him back, it's going to have an effect. That's having an effect in the gold market. One reason I'm not sure it's over yet is because Indian politicians are now trying to figure out a way to get the Indians to sell their gold. They have huge amounts of gold they have built up over the decades, and if I don't know if they can do it, if they can force the Indians to sell their gold, who knows how long the correction will last. I hope I'm smart enough that if it goes down enough to buy more gold, because the bull market in gold is not over yet. You know, at the end of this decade, we're all going to be very glad we own gold and silver.
And what about commodities? In what phase are we now? Because I've known you for a long time, and commodities, we've seen the rise, and now we are, in what phase in commodities is the world, and what do you think is to position yourself in commodities for the next year?
Well, it depends on which commodities. It's like anything else. Some of us will remember that there was a big bull market in stocks between 1982 and 2000. During that period of time, there were many periods when stocks collapsed. In 1987, stocks went down 40 to 80% after they had tripled. Many people said, see, it was a fluke, it's over. 1989, 1990, 1994, 1996, really 97 and 98. There were many big setbacks, collapses, and the smart people said, well, that stock market, bull market is over. It wasn't over. It was correction, a normal correction, and in my view, that's what's happening with commodities now. But whenever there's a correction, there's always a good reason to have the correction, and I suspect, I've known 5 or 10 years, that this is another correction in a bull market, because I have not seen enough permanent supply come on stream to offset the supply and demand imbalances which developed in the 80s and 90s.
Okay, well, that's a clear answer. And maybe a little question on in general on your investment approach. You know, because in this world which is changing rapidly, more rapidly than ever, or seems to be changing rapidly, what's your investment approach? What triggers your action, so to say?
Well, I'm pretty lazy and lethargic, but whenever I come across an opportunity, I hope I'm smart enough to act. I'm not really selling short much these days. I do have some shorts in junk bonds, and listen, I've messed up in shorting the bond market a few times in the last several years. This time it's working. The time before it worked, but I don't know if it's working for good or not. Eventually, the 30-year bull market in bonds is going to come to an end. It may have come to an end. I don't know. My timing has not been great, except the last 2 or 3 times. As far as other things, when I think I see something that's a good opportunity, I invest. I think you may remember, Lucas, that I bought some airlines a few years ago. I've been buying more airlines recently. Russia, I was pessimistic about for 46 years. I'm now investing in Russia a little bit, or actually I'm getting to be more than a little bit now. China, they had a big session in Beijing in November. The Chinese said that it's as important as the big session they had in 1978 when Deng Xiaoping said we've got to change everything we've been doing for the last few hundred years is wrong. And then again in 1993 when they again changed and opened to the world. So they say that this session was as important as those two. If you read it carefully, you might find some places where they're going to put a lot of money. And so, Lucas, if the Chinese government, or any government, especially any big government, is going to put a lot of money somewhere, I like to put my money there too, because chances are somebody's going to make a lot of money, and I hope I'm one of them. I'm not sure that the Chinese stock market has made its bottom yet, but I've started to participate in some of the areas that they are promoting.
On China, I would like to. I read something yesterday. It's a little article, and it said China's push to open up its economy is winning praise from Goldman Sachs, from Jeffrey Group, which all predict last month a massive multi-year bull run for stocks in China. But now there's one voice called John Paul Smith. He's at Deutsche Bank. He's an equity strategist, and he looks at China and he says he detects some of the same signs of a financial meltdown that led him to predict Russia 1998 stock market crash months in advance. He's basically saying there's potential for a debt trap in industrial companies which can trigger economy-wide financial crisis as early as next year. What's your view on this?
Well, you may remember that I was short Russia and short the ruble back at the end of the 90s, and that was a nice time to be worried about Russia. I never heard of this guy, but I'm sure he profited as well. There's certainly going to be setbacks in China. Nobody goes straight up. You know, in America in the 19th century, Lucas, we had 15 depressions with a D. We had a terrible civil war. We had massacres in the streets. We had very little rule of law. I mean, America was a big mess, and yet we became the most successful country in the 20th century. Now, if you bought at the wrong time in America, of course, you got wiped out. But if you held on or got your timing even reasonably right, you made a staggering amount of money, as Warren Buffett pointed out, in the 20th century. So China will certainly have problems. There seems to be too much leverage in the system right now, or maybe not too. Whether it's too much or not, I don't know. But it's certainly a lot of leverage. I know they have a problem in property and real estate in many parts of China. They say for years that they're going to solve that problem. They haven't yet. They keep getting panicky and giving in when problems start developing. I hope that they're going to clean out some of the excesses. But if it happens, I see that as an opportunity to buy more China, not to panic. And I am not short China. China is down, 70% from its all-time high. It's certainly not a bubble. something is down 70% from its all-time high. As you probably remember, Russia was not down 70% from its all-time high in 1998.
Thank you.
How about the dollar? I mean, the way you argue, you should be in the dollar too, and in the Swiss franc, because these are the currencies. Even if America is the greatest debt nation in history, these are the currencies that people will be running if that's happen. What you foresee?
Very good, Ralph. I actually own both of those currencies at the moment, not because I have great confidence, certainly not in the US dollar. I certainly don't have great confidence in the Swiss franc anymore either, but I own them both because I do see more turmoil coming in the world in the next year or two, and many people will flee to the US dollar and the Swiss franc, mainly because they don't know what else to do. The U.S. dollar is not a safe haven, but many people see it that way.
Exactly.
And so and when the next crisis comes, for whatever reason, people are going to buy the dollar. Well, I own the dollar. Now, Ralph, the question is, okay, let's say I get it right a time or two more, and then everybody rushes into the dollar. But there's going to come a time when that's not going to be the place to be anymore. I have no idea when. I have no idea if I'll be smart enough to get out. I suspect the thing to do will be to go into Chinese currency or perhaps hard assets, probably hard assets, but maybe even the Chinese currency, because the dollar is very flawed and it does have serious problems. But I own it. Having said that. I think we just got Irene, didn't we?
Yeah.
Yeah, I just need to figure out the mic.
I can hear you, Irene.
Yeah.
Hallelujah, hallelujah, hallelujah. Her child did it for her. I'm sure a 3-year-old did it for her.
Well, her child is too young, I think.
But anyway, nice to see you. Nice to hear you again, Irene. Go ahead.
Yes, no, it was my computer, so that's why. No, I think it's quite interesting on the tapering. I have actually another question for you. Let's go back to Europe. So I think if we look at the markets, it seems that the markets actually tend to say or think that the European crisis is over. But on the other hand, if you look at things like youth unemployment or people living below the poverty line in a lot of European countries, I mean, these values are quite alarming. So what is happening there? What's your view on the European crisis? Is it over? Is it solved? Is there more to come? And why are markets reacting in a way that seem to tell us everything's fine?
Irene, I know it's winter wherever you are, but look out the window and you will see a rising sea of liquidity. Central banks everywhere are throwing a lot of money out the window. The people getting that money are better off, which means that many people are better off. It does not mean that the problem is solved. Unemployment in America is higher today than it was in 2007, 2008. And the debt is at the expense of staggering increases in debt. No, the problem is not solved. The problem is just papered over and pushed down the road for a while. It would be nice if they had let the problem let us all collapse in 2008 or 2009. Then the problem would be finished by now. But that's not the way they did it. They said, no, we don't want anybody to fail. We're not going to let anybody fail. And so they pushed the problem down the road. Now, what they're doing, Irene, the people who save and invest, the people who've done things right over the past 20 or 30 years are now getting ruined and wiped out because interest rates are nothing anywhere in the world. And they're getting wiped out at the expense of the people who did it wrong, the people who went and built up huge debts and bought 4 or 5 houses with no job and no money down. So what I, anyway, have considered all my life, the way people are supposed to do things, those people are being destroyed to bail out the other people. Is the problem over? No, the problem's not over. It's pushed out. If you say, look out the window, you'll see the sea rising. And everybody thinks they're better off. And some are.
Thanks.
Matthew?
Matt?
I would like to ask Matthew a question first. Matthew, you said you were
Yes,
drinking
hi, Jim.
wine.
Yeah, you mentioned about.
I would like to ask Matthew a question first. Matthew, you said you were drinking wine last night in Taiwan for Christmas. Were you drinking Chinese wine, or where was the wine from?
The wine was from France.
Oh, France.
I think in North Asia, we're probably consuming as much French European.
Well, you're certainly drinking a lot of wine.
Well, you mentioned about Chinese wine. Mao Tai has been falling off.
Well, I cannot bear Mao Tai. I don't like Mao Tai at all.
Maybe I can ask a question.
Yeah, you can ask a question, but I just want to make one quick comment. You said that the Chinese are drinking huge amounts of French
So
wine.
I heard that unofficially Mao Tai has increased.
I'm not getting it. You're breaking up, Matthew. Can you hear him?
No, Matthew, you
Breaking up.
don't seem to be able to. Maybe you can write your question up in the.
You were
in the
breaking
chat.
up, Matthew.
Well, I think Matt is in Hong Kong.
Can you hear me?
Now we can hear you. Please ask your question.
Oh, you cannot hear me?
We hear you now. We hear you now.
Okay. Yeah. Perfect. So back to China. I think that there's still a bit of overproduction happening. We talk about Mao Tai, the Chinese liquor. They have increased production by four times, and the prices are dropping. And as you know, it is what population.
I'm not hearing you anymore.
No, Matt,
Yeah.
I think you're too far away today in the airport. It must be difficult to get connected. So if you have a question, you can put it on the chat, and I can post it to Jim. And otherwise, we just have to, have another go, another time with you, and see if you can then join us again for such a question. But I think he was asking about the liquor and that there's overproduction.
Mao Tai. He was talking about Mao Tai, which is what the Chinese have drunk for centuries. It's not like brandy, but it's comparable. I mean, they drink it after dinner. They drink like we drink. The Westerners drink brandy after dinner, etc. Of course, many Chinese drink it all day long, and many Westerners drink brandy all day long. It's horrible stuff. But I've always disliked it. In recent times, I've had good Mao Tai, and I have learned that good Mao Tai is fine. But for many years, I only had cheap, bad Mao Tai. It is good, but they have increased production enormously, and it's like anything else, Lucas, Ralph. I mean, all of it. If you increase production of anything, the price is going to go down, and that's what the Chinese have been doing.
Well, he just asked me the question over chat. He's saying, has China got an overcapacity issue after 2 decades of investment in production?
Of Mao Tai?
No, in general, an overcapacity issue.
Well, yes, and some things I said before, that some parts of the Chinese economy are going to suffer in the next 2 or 3 years, especially property. The government has said that it is determined to bring down property prices in China. Now, that means that there's going to be some bankruptcies in property. That means there's overcapacity in construction, because if prices are coming down, then you're going to see construction go down. So any industry or company that's involved with building property in China has got overcapacity, and the government is determined to do something about it. However, the government is also determined to do something about the horrible pollution in China. Is there overcapacity in pollution control? Absolutely not. Staggering shortages in pollution control in China. China has determined to expand its railroad system dramatically. There's not overcapacity in the railroad. The Chinese said last month, America and China are more or less the same size geographically, but America has 250% more railroad kilometers than we do. So they're going, and they got, by the way, China has 4 times the population, 5 times the population. So no, there's not overcapacity in railroad building or railroad supplies. But in some parts of China, yes, massive overcapacity. Other places, no.
Well, I think that means also that there are department stores, retail shops are popping up in a huge tempo. And if you look at the internet e-commerce activities, these are booming and catching up in the US. So there must be also opportunities from the shift from, like, say, brick and mortar to the e-world. This must also have a huge impact on China.
Well, of course, but everything you just said and Matt just said is true of Germany, it's true of America. I mean, shopping malls are drying up in the U.S. Retail store has huge overcapacity because the internet has changed a lot of things. Lucas, your children and mine will never go to a bank because they're not going to need to. It's all going to be on the internet now. Your children and mine will never go to a post office. There's massive overcapacities of post offices in the world because of what's happened to the internet. So, yes, there's overcapacity, but not just actually in the West it's worse than in China with post offices, because China didn't have so many post offices. But yeah, there's massive overcapacity of many things in many countries because of what's happening with the newspapers. Libraries, there will not be any libraries in 50 years. There's massive overcapacity of libraries. Libraries are an obsolete institution. So yeah, lots of things are overcapacity, and that's going to change.
Well, maybe to a last round of questions around, for me it would be, what for you for 2014 are the emerging topics that you are looking at? Which topic are you following at the moment?
Well, I've mentioned Russia, I've mentioned the changes in China, North Korea. I'm wildly optimistic about the changes that are coming to North Korea. Airlines I've mentioned, agriculture I've mentioned. Gold. I wouldn't be surprised if gold didn't make it slow in 2014. Gold is not going to make it slow, Lucas, until all of the mystics and the faithful get washed out. Right now, there are just too many mystics, too many people who are convinced that gold cannot go down. We're not going to hit bottom until they all get washed out. I won't say wiped out, but washed out. There's just too many of them left. It's like any other part. I'm not picking on gold now. It could have been, you remember the internet bubble back in 1999. Many people just could not believe that the internet wasn't the wave of the future. And it was the wave of the future. It didn't mean the stocks couldn't collapse. And just like I've said before, gold is going to be great over the years. It doesn't mean it cannot go down a lot. And until the faithful, until the mystics, the true believers get washed out of the market, it cannot make a bottom. But once they're all out, and that may happen in 2014, then it's time to stock up on gold and precious metals.
And you talked about North Korea, but how to invest in North Korea, even if the story like from the north and the south, and how to catch such a topic?
Well, that may be good for another hangout, because the problem is there's no way for you and most of us there's no stock market. The Chinese are pouring huge amounts of money into the northern part of North Korea, and some of those companies will probably be good investments. I just don't know who they are.
Well, we can do a hangout on this, that's especially where we can do hangout, because we can bring together people that think that they have the answer for North Korea, and so we can challenge them with you.
I'd be delighted to.
There was another topic. Myanmar was something I think that you mentioned last year, maybe already 2 years ago. I think that's also a problem, that it's quite tricky to actually invest via stocks, or impossible.
It is. There's only one company I know. It's a Singapore company. It trades in Singapore. Most of its business is in Myanmar. I don't know any other. I own shares of a small airline in Thailand, which is starting to expand into Myanmar, but that's not enough. They're going to have a stock market, they say, in 2015. Then we can all invest in Myanmar. But I don't know any way to invest in Myanmar at the moment, other than this one company that I mentioned. Yeah, actually, I'm glad you brought it up, and I just got I found anyway a vicious email from somebody in 2009 saying, "How can you mention Myanmar? Terrible, terrible capitalist. It's a horrible place." Well, needless to say, he looks pretty foolish now. Yeah. That's one I got right. I look pretty foolish lots of times, Irene, as you know, but that's one I did get right.
Matthew just went off, I think, but he wanted me to ask you one last question for his side, and that's about 3D printing. He is following this topic of 3D printing, which is going to change manufacturing, massively. What's your view on this? Are you invested in it or following it?
I don't have any investments in 3D printing. I certainly should have. We all should have, because many of the stocks have gone through the roof. It's another one of those things that's apparently is going to change the world. I don't have any way to invest at the moment. One thing, though, I will say, or at least in my view, many people say it's going to mean the revival of the U.S. and Europe, etc. I'm not quite sure why that follows, because if they can do 3D printing in Germany, they can certainly do it in Burma. They can do it anywhere in the world. There's no magic about it, and it'll be cheaper in these other, maybe not as much cheaper, but it's certainly going to be cheaper. If it works, which it apparently will, you can do it anywhere in the world, and it will be cheaper for many countries to do it than Germany or America or Japan or some of the other people, which may get some boost, but not enough long term to save us.
Can I ask something about that? I live in a parallel economy almost to everything that you guys do, because I live in a digital world. I don't get paid necessarily with dollars or gold or anything. I get paid through PayPal, and if it's not PayPal, it's a trade. So there's a huge parallel economy in the world that's growing tremendously, and this leads into 3D printing. 3D printing is going to wake up a local economy everywhere around the world. How does this affect the large economy overall, if that were to happen in the next 5 years, Jim?
Well, it's certainly decent. You just made the point better than I can. It is going to decentralize lots of things. I mean, I could sit right here and perhaps make pots and pans for my own kitchen if I had the printer. So no, it's going to decentralize a lot of things. The demand for raw materials will not go down, because no matter what we're printing out, we got to have something to make shirts or buttons or pots. No matter what it is, we may not make those pots in expensive production line things in Detroit or some other place. But everything you said is accurate and correct. It too, I said before, none of our children will ever go to a post office. Most of our children will never join a big union, because there won't be big unions anymore, because there won't be these massive, huge factories or massive, huge manufacturing companies that will need unions. The workers will be very dispersed and separate.
Thank you.
Ralph, maybe you?
But Bertie, I just want to say what I said before about North Korea and other things. The world's always changing. That's why it's so much fun. It's no matter what you think today, all of us, no matter what you think today, I assure you that in 2024, it's not going to be true. You can pick any year in history, and no matter what people thought, that the way the world was, 15 years later, the world was totally changed. 1900, 1910. The difference in the world in 1900 and 1925 was astonishing. The difference in 1925 and 1940. Everybody thought they had all the answers in 1925. My God, if they'd looked ahead for the next 15 years, depression, war, they wouldn't have believed a word of it. So no matter what we think right now, I assure you, we're wrong. The world's going to be very, very, very different in 2028, 29. So you're right, Bertie. All of you are right. Matthew, Ralph. Just remember, that's the great joy. And there are always people rising. There are always people going down. Let's try to stay out of the ones that are going down.
Exactly.
Ralph, maybe a last question for you?
Well, that was a wonderful end, but it would
I
change.
thought I too, but I didn't want to.
No, but just a little question. Is it correct you have still your Swiss bank account, and are you planning to keep it? But that's
Oh, no. Yes. No, I certainly have a Swiss bank account, which has always been reported from day one. I always have reported my, and I used to have Swiss bankers say, "Why are you doing it? You're crazy. You don't have to report it." But I always have. Now, turns out I wasn't so crazy after all. I still have my Swiss bank. I have more than one Swiss bank account, by the way. I have bank accounts in several countries in the world. all of which have always been reported. I just figured that why do I ever need the hassle of not reporting this? And I will tell you, Ralph, when I went to Wall Street, I met a guy who said to me, I just cannot sell the stock because if I do, I have a tax problem.
Yeah.
And I said to myself, I hope that someday I have a tax problem. I hope that I have to worry about paying taxes someday. So that's been my approach ever since. I always said, don't pay the taxes. Why? From my point of view, from where I grew up, having to pay taxes was a wonderful, wonderful problem to have. So I've always reported all of my Swiss bank accounts and others.
Fine.
Well, I think it's a great line to close off this session. I hope you liked it, Jim, as a first hangout. I'm looking forward to the next one.
Oh, no, I've certainly had fun. It's been interesting. I hope. Unfortunately, I've talked too much, but I guess that's what I'm supposed to do.
Oh, that's definitely what you're supposed to do, and people will like it. And but to close it up, I would ask people to subscribe to JimRogersWorld.com for free, and then you can basically listen in and participate on any call with Jim Rogers, and we can talk about the world and see what people think about emerging topics like maybe North Korea, South Korea, and 3D printing and other ones. So I had fun. Thank you, Jim, for participating. Thank you, Ralph. Thank you, Matthew. Thank you, Irene. Thank you, Bertie. And speak to you all next time.
Thank you. Thank all of you. Bye-bye.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Okay. Thanks.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.